Hey everybody, it's Dana and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be playing with the new release from Ink on 3, and this is the adorable pumpkin patch. I thought this would be a great way to show you a new technique that I'm doing with some color pencils. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring in my Misty here so I can stamp out this image. Now this image is very unique because it's an image of an overhead pumpkin. Usually, you see the pumpkin straight on, but I love this design that you're actually looking down upon the pumpkin. It's so pretty, and I love Floret for thinking outside of the box with this one. So I'm lining that up on Nina Solar White paper. This is 80-pound paper, and I'm just going to grab myself some magnets to hold it in place. Now, once I have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and grab myself my ink. For the ink today, I'm going to be using Ink on 3, and this is the Blackout ink. And I love this ink because it gives a really crisp line. Now, remember, anytime you are working with new stamps that you have not conditioned or like wiped off the residue from the stamp manufacturing, it might not come out crisp on the first try. So just remember sometimes before jumping into stamping right away to clean off those stamps. So you can see I do have a great impression here, but it's a little bit faint, and that is because I didn't prime my stamp first. So since I'm using a Misty, I'm able to just close my lid. I'm going to rub that pretty well. And then when I lift that up, I have a nice crisp black line. All right, so let's go ahead and start the coloring. For today's coloring, I'm going to be using my favorite pencils. These are my Polychromo Faber Castell pencils. And I'm just going to grab out a couple of shades. For my leaves, I'm going to need some greens, and for a technique I'm doing on the pumpkins, I'm going to use a couple of shades of orange and yellow combination. Usually when you see something in nature, it's not a flat color. There's going to be several colors. All right, now since I have the beginning of my pencils that I need, I'm going to go ahead and set this aside. And I do want to zoom in on this so you can really see the technique I'm using with these pencils. So to start, I'm just going to grab my lightest shade, and I'll have all the colors listed below. I believe this one was light green, but again, I'll make sure to list everything below. And I'm just kind of going in a swirling motion, like little tiny little circles back and forth over that leaf. Now, I don't need to be perfect with this. I actually just want to get some of that color pencil down. Now, since this paper is Nina Solar White 80-pound paper, it's going to take the pencil differently than if I was using, let's say, Bristol paper. So also keep that in mind when you're coloring. Make sure you're using something that's going to accept your pencil well. So as you can see, I'm just going around this image, again, just filling it in, going with those tiny little circles back and forth, just to get an even coverage down. And some places might have a little bit more of a highlight, and that's still okay. I'm just trying to get down some of the colors. Now, I usually do this too when I'm using Copic markers. I like to put the lightest shade down over everything and get like a base shade. All right, once I have that done, I'm going to kind of go in with a cross hatch movement with my pencil, and I'll show you. So as you can see, I'm just kind of drawing lines back and forth, back and forth. It's just like a hatch line. And I'm just going to do this all the way across this leaf. Now, what's that of giving me the opportunity to do is to have some light spots in this, some darker spots in this, but is also giving my paper a little bit of texture. So sometimes if you're coloring, if you don't really want to do a lot of blending with when you color, this is a great way to get down some of that color and also give some texture to whatever you are coloring. So I'm just going to make sure I have all of that covered. And again, I don't have to be perfect with this because that darker green, or that lighter green rather, is underneath. So I'm also going to have color showing through from that. Once I get this done, I want to switch and I want to go in the opposite direction. So I went one way, now I'm coming back in with that pencil and I'm going to go the other way. So you can kind of see like the hatch marks and the lines in this, and it's really going to give this leaf a lot of texture. So again, lightly going back and forth. Now I will say if you use a sharper pencil, your lines are going to be a little bit sharper. But if you choose to use a pencil that's not very sharp, you're still going to be able to do this technique. As you can see here, my pencil is not like really, really precisely sharp, but I am getting that movement in my leaf. So again, I'm just going over everything that I've already done. And now I'm going to have, again, another shade. So I'm going to have a little bit of darker green in here now with the two shades I have beneath. So it's a really, really easy and quick way to color something if you don't want to spend a lot of detail time working up your layers. So I'm just going to go around the edges, make sure I have that color down. And now I'm going to come in with the darkest green. I'm going to turn my paper, and I'm sorry, you guys, I'm a turner when I color. My paper doesn't lay one way. And I'm going to do the hatch marks again in another direction against that green. I'll say that against the green of what I already did. And I'm coming in with that darker shade. So again, I'm going to get that lighter shade underneath. That was the very beginning one. I'm going to get that middle green still peeking through. And then I'm going to get this darker green. And again, when you color like this, it just gives it some texture. I like coloring like this, especially if I'm doing leaves or something that's in nature. I probably wouldn't do this if I was coloring a person per se, but I would definitely do it if I was coloring a flower because I like to see movement. Now, once I have that all done, I'm going to come in with that darker shade and add some shading. I'm going back to that circular motion that I started with when I started to put down that lighter color. As you can see, I'm going right back in with that same motion. My hatching is kind of done on this, and I'm just going to come in and do those little bit of circles just to add the shading around the leaf. Now, if you don't want to do this or you want to do this in a lighter color, feel free to do that as well. I just thought I wanted the tips of mine to be a little bit darker, as if like they were kind of like dying off a little bit, like with the changing of seasons. So I'm just going to keep going around again in those little tiny circles all the way around this leaf. Now, again, if I'm going to be doing something that's really detailed, like some of these smaller leaves on here, I don't really have a lot of room to do that. So I might not do it completely, or I might not do as many layers. Now I'm coming in with that medium shade green. And again, I'm doing just those little circle motions and I'm blending in that darker color. Now you can see how quick and easy this was to color by doing this technique. It's really, really simple. And I really challenge you to give it a try and see if you like it. I'm not really worried about going outside the lines right now because I can clean that up later. Now I'm going to come back in with that darker green and I'm going to go along the veins of that leaf because that would be a little bit darker and you would see that through the image. So I'm just, again, going in with those little bitty circles and just going right along that. And that also is going to help me get a little bit more definition as well as shading on this leaf. I'll turn it one more time. Sorry, again, I'm a turner when I color. It's just out of habit. And just clean up some of the areas that I might have missed. Now look how pretty that looks. It gives you a lot of texture in there and it did not take a long time to color. Now I'm going to show you again on this one over here. So one more time, I'm going in with the lighter color. Once again, just tiny little circles going back and forth. Again, I'm not trying to be perfect on this. I just need to get the color down. Now, I will say anytime you do this coloring, you want to make sure that your colors have enough contrast between them. So if you're going to use a green, I would suggest 3 shades, a light, a medium, and a dark. Don't go for colors that are too close together because then you're not going to really see the definition. So again, that was the lighter color green. Next, I'm coming in with that medium green, and that medium green is called permanent green. Again, I'll make sure to list everything below. And I'm going right back, see it again, I'm just going in a hatching motion. Just like drawing like quick lines back and forth all the way across this leaf. Now I'm going to show you a little bit something different on this leaf, just for you guys to have a different kind of option with this. So I have all my hatch marks in, and that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to come in, and I'm going to go straight to that darker color. So you see, I didn't do two colors or two hash directions with that medium tone. I'm going to go straight to the dark. So if you don't want to have two shades back to back on your hatching design, then just skip that second layer. So you're going to do the first light green layer, the medium green layer, and then your dark layer. So again, just coming right back through there one more time, making sure I have those hatch lines there. And then I want to make sure that I do that circle motion again to add in those shadows. Again, these aren't shadows per se for me. I'm just kind of doing this to show like the leaves might be dying off on the tip, so they'll be a little bit darker. As you can see, I'm just going again in those tiny little circles, just getting down that color, and I'm making sure not to press too hard. Now this paper is not very thick because it's only 80 pounds, so I really don't want to press too hard onto this because I don't want it to tear through my paper. Now once I have that layer down, this is looking really, really good. I'm going to come back with that medium shade of green one more time and go right back over that darker green. That's just going to help me like kind of blend it out a little bit, and also to get the color kind of pushed into the paper. Now, if you really want to get this pushed into the paper or flatten out that hatching look, you can go in with a clear blending pencil. This blending pencil has no color to it. So all it's going to do is push the two colors together and really push it down into the paper. So again, I'm just doing those little swirly motions, and you can't really tell too much here, but I have some of the pencil, the lighter color kind of coming up, and that's because I'm kind of like scrubbing it into, and whatever is left over or excess that was floating on the top, it's just going to come up a little bit. So all I'm doing is kind of like blowing that off to the side, but if you have a little brush, you can also brush that off. And you're really going to be able to see the difference between these two techniques. This one is going to look a lot smoother and a little bit more finished, still has texture to it, compared to this one over here, where you can really see the lines that I've developed in that. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you want to go ahead and try a little bit something different, use those hash marks. It's a really quick way to color, and if you want them flattened out, just go ahead and use that clear pencil. That's going to help you get that a little bit smoother and a little bit more into the paper. Now, if you want, and I don't suggest this very often, if you want, you can go back over with that darker color and just add a little bit more texture if you want to. Now, usually when your pencil's into your paper, you really don't want to mess with it. But I just want to add a little bit more texture to this. This is totally up to you if you want to do it. All right, so now we have that done. I'm going to color it and then have this set to the side for a little bit later. Now I want to start working on my pumpkins. So for the pumpkins, I wanted to paper piece them. I have not paper pieced something in forever, but I wanted to give myself the opportunity to have some polka dots on my pumpkin. So this is just a piece of paper out of an older pack from Doodlebug, and I'm just going to grab my tape runner, kind of run it on the back, just to hold this in place. And I do want to double check where I'm placing that paper so I know that I'm going to capture all of my pumpkin on there. So I'll press that down. It's just going to stick there while I go ahead and stamp this out. I'm going to use the same ink, which is that Ink on 3 Blackout ink. Like again, it's just going to give me a really nice crisp line. And I'll close my lid. And what I like about paper piecing, it kind of takes your decorating of your cards up a different level. So I'll press that down, and you can tell I have the brown parts or the stem parts on the top of the pumpkins. I'll show you how to color them in later. Now I'll go ahead and pull that off, and now I need to trim out my pumpkins. Now anytime you paper piece, you want to cut on that black line. Whatever your black line is, you want to kind of cut right on that line. You don't want to cut outside of that line, because remember, your pumpkin is already stamped on your initial image. So you don't want to kind of have like the overlay of black lines. So I am actually moving my paper and my scissors with this. The best thing is to keep your scissors still and move your paper when you have to go around a corner. That's just my little tip of the day. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these out. And then once this is trimmed, it'll be ready to go on our card. Now, in order to go on the card, I do want to emphasize those black lines. And remember, if you have any boo-boos on there, get yourself a sand eraser and just erase anything that you've gone outside your lines of. This tool right here is a must-have, and it stays on the corner of my desk. Anytime I'm doing any kind of coloring, I just use that mono sander, and it cleans everything up perfectly. Now here's our pumpkins, but I do want to emphasize a little bit of the black line because I cut and it's like paper, it's kind of white along the edges. So I just grabbed a Copic marker and I'm just going very evenly around the pumpkin. And that's just around the edges, just to bring a little bit of that black in to marry up with that other black line. Now, the reason I say to cut on the black line when you're cutting out is so you still have the line and you can kind of follow it a little bit later with your Copic marker, or if you have a Spectrum Noir pen, any kind of black marker will do. You just want to kind of emphasize it. You just don't want to end up having the double lines if you cut on the outside of that black line when you're cutting this out. All right, so now we have that done, and then I'm just going to show you how that's going to look once I place it down. And look how adorable those pumpkins are. And you can see how the black lines match up now. Just that little bit of that black marker really makes a difference. Now, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the top of the pumpkin stems. I didn't mind having this stamped on that light color because I knew I can come up with some browns and color over that area. So again, I'm using just those little swirls at first to fill in that stem. And again, this is really small. I mean, I don't have a lot of area here to color, but I am going to do just a tad bit of that little hatching back and forth on this. Excuse the top of my head, but I really wanted to get over this little piece because it was small. So I'm just doing a tiny bit of the hatching, and I'm really only going in one direction because that area is really, really tiny. All right, so now our pumpkins are almost done, but I do want to go ahead and get them onto the card. So for this, I'm just going to grab myself some liquid adhesive. And the reason I'm using liquid adhesive is going to allow me the opportunity to kind of move this in place before I actually stick it down. So again, this is an older bottle out of a Hero Arts kit, and I think you can actually still get the Hero Arts liquid adhesive on their shop and also on Simon Says Stamp. I'll go ahead and list that below as well. So I'm just pushing that in to make sure my lines marry up, and that's the good thing of using the liquid adhesive. I have an opportunity to kind of push that into place. And once I have that done, I do want to add a little bit of definitions to these pumpkins. They kind of look flat compared to everything else. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab out those orangey pencils and yellow pencils that I talked about earlier. That's where I'm going to bring in this color. So I'm just making sure to press down, make sure that that glue is there. And now I'm going to start adding some shading with the medium color orange. This is going to give my pumpkin a little bit of definition and also bring a little bit more interest and color up to that paper. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in really quick so you guys can see this. So as you can see, I'm doing the same thing, just those little circle motions all the way around my pumpkin. And now this paper is really, really thin, so I don't want to push hard. So anytime you're using any of the 6x6 paper pads, the designer paper pads, just remember that paper is a lot thinner than if you were using like 80-pound paper. So just be mindful of that when you're coloring because you don't want to poke through that paper. Again, I'm doing little swirls all the way around it. And I decided not to use, as I was coloring this, I already knew I did not want to use that darker orange. So I'm only going to use 2 colors on this. Again, I'm just bringing that color all the way around. that pumpkin. So I'm going in between where the seams would be in the pumpkins, or like the little hump marks. And I'm also going around the bottom just so you guys can see that it's a rounded object. So this is really, really easy to do. You can do this totally with any kind of designer paper that you use when you're paper piercing, or paper piecing rather, a object on your card. So I'll go right around this edge. And then once I'm finished with that, I'm going to bring in that lighter shade. Okay. I want to bring in that because it's a little bit of an undertone of yellow. And I can go ahead and blend that out, and it actually blends into my paper. So anytime you want to add shading or something like that already to a very busy paper, make sure that you use colors that are very close in color to the paper. So you can see that that orangey color is kind of fading back a little bit, and it's just blending in because I'm using that yellow to kind of go over it. So the lines don't look as stark, but I still have that shading, that definition there. So very easy. Again, just going right around, not being too precise on this because the colors are very close, but you can see the difference between this one and that one. Totally see the difference. The one that I'm starting to color now looks kind of flat, doesn't have like any personality. And this one here that I added the color to, you can definitely see there's a difference there. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you're doing something, you just want to kind of pop it up a little bit more without going like really crazy with it. Grab that color pencil. That color pencil will really help you bring something to life. Again, I'm just going in tiny little circles. And again, I'll come back in with that goldy orange color and just kind of smooth out those edges. Now, this is a great way to add a quick definition to any kind of pattern paper. So keep this in your arsenal and use it when you have the opportunity. So now this part of the card is done, and I want to work on my sentiment. So I grabbed out 2 colors of Distress Oxide. I have Mustard Seed and Wild Honey. Again, that's going to match the colors I've been using so far on this card. So I do want to pull some of that yellowy goldy color and that orangey color up to the top of my card for my sentiment. So to do this, I'm just going to use my blending brush, and this is just a makeup brush that I purchased off of Amazon. I'll link above and below. I did a review on these. So I'm going to add that down, and then I'm going to grab the pumpkin patch die. Within that pumpkin patch die, you're going to get this sentiment that says thanks. I want this to be my sentiment today. Now the pumpkin patch die will actually cut out the pumpkin patch, the one that I just colored, but I didn't need that today, but I did want to use this gorgeous sentiment. Now I'm going to kind of do this in an ombre look between like 2 colors. And that's just so I can have a little bit of that orangey undertone with that yellow. The same exact thing that I have on my pattern paper. So I'm just going to add a little bit of it to the top. Not really going too far into the yellow. Just enough that when I place my die back down, I'm going to have that really nice 2-toned color. Love how this is turning out. Now I can go ahead and take this on over to my die cut machine and trim this out for you guys. Now once I have that done, I'm going to pop out the letters. Now what's so cool about this die is going to pop out the letters, but it's also going to give me some faux stitching, which is going to look awesome on this card. Now I do have my S kind of stuck in there, so I'm just going to grab my pick tool from Concord and Ninth and pop that out. Now these letters are so pretty. You'll see just that faint difference at the top and the bottom. But look at those little stitch marks, and look how perfect it looks with that pattern paper. So remember that, match it to your pattern paper if you can. Now I want to keep this simple, and I'm just going to put my sentiment across the top. Now I'm not going to worry about lining this up perfectly. I could get my T-ruler and make sure everything's lined up, but I kind of want this to kind of look like it was handmade, like I just placed the letters on there, not necessarily like having everything lined up. I kind of want my sentiment to be like a little bit on the flowy side. So I'm not putting any adhesive on it right now. I'm just looking for my placement. So I would say before you ever put any adhesive on anything, especially if you're doing letters, just make sure you line up your letters kind of where you want it. Doesn't need to be perfect, but you don't want to quickly add your adhesive to it. Now for my letters, I knew I wanted to pop them up. So I'm using these, I think these are by Doris. They're like really thin foam tapes, and they're like little strips. So this is perfect anytime I'm using tiny little sentiment or tiny alphabets that I need to have, or if I'm having something that's really small and I don't want to cut down my larger 3M tape. I always reach for these. These sit on in the top of my drawer on my desk, and they're really, really handy without having to trim down a lot of that thicker and that bigger uh, foam tape. So now I'm going to go ahead and place the rest of these down, but I'm not going to push this into the paper yet. I'm just placing them where I want them. Now that I have all of them done and I already have the foam on the back of them, I can kind of play around a little bit more where I want them. And I think that looks great. I am now going to peel off the backing of this foam tape. So anytime you get this tape, know that there's a front side that's going to stick, and then you're going to have release paper on the back side. Now, when I do this and I go to put this back down on my panel, you will see I'm not pushing it into place. I'm kind of just like setting it down. So this way I'll have a little bit of an opportunity a little bit later to kind of move that where I want it. So again, I'm just going to release the paper on the back, and I'm not going to push this in. I'm just going to place it down. And this again affords me the opportunity to move those letters any way I want before they are permanent. Now, since I have all of them done, I'm going to take that S and kind of pop it down where I think I might want it. Now, since I didn't press any of them in, I have an opportunity to move them. So if I need to shift them a little bit or move them, tilt them, because I didn't press those in, I have that chance to do it. So now I'm going to pick up that K. I can place it where I want it. Now, if you wanted to do this as well and still have some movement, you can put a little bit of liquid adhesive right behind that foam tape and have that opportunity to move it as well. But look how cute this card is. We're bringing that color, that pumpkin color, from the top to the bottom. Now we can go ahead and put our card together. So I'm just going to grab my EK Success tool, and I'm going to score this for an A2 card size. I'll go ahead and flip that over. Now, I like to score with this tool, but I don't like to press down my paper with this tool. I like to get my other one, which is a thicker handled bone folder, and press that down. To me, this gives me a really great crease over the tool that I score with. Totally optional. It's just something I do, but you don't need to do that. I'll grab that and I'll push that down, and I get a really great score line. Now I am going to set this white on white card panel on a white card base because I really don't want to have any color that's going to distract. I am going to trim off a little bit of that pumpkin that's kind of hanging off on the end. And then I can go ahead and put this on my card. Now we are having a Instagram hop today for Ink on 3. So make sure you head on over to the Ink on 3 Instagram page and see what they've created along with some of the designs from other design team members. This is such a pretty release. And again, Florette, you really knocked it out of the park with this one. I did put some adhesive on here, but I am going to add some liquid adhesive right over that tape runner. Just again, so I have a little bit of wiggle room before I put this on, and then I really know that this panel is going to adhere to my card base. So I'll bring over my card base and I'll go ahead and place that down. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me today. Don't forget that you can find me on all of my social media links, which I'll link behind this last picture. You guys have a fantastic day, and if you haven't subscribed, think about subscribing so you don't miss my next tutorial. Thanks everybody, and I will see you in another video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.